ESNY.
Ladies and gentlemen, for the sixth time in about a few months, football is back. But this time, there was actually indeed some National Football League competition on the field this week. And of course, the one we'll be focusing on are the exploits of the New York Jets as they took on the New York Giants in the annual MetLife Stadium Snoopy Bowl this week over in East Rutherford, New Jersey, as they took on the Giants in their annual preseason showdown in the first week of the preseason rather than the third week. It's de facto practice squads, but hey, it's football and you had nothing else to do now, didn't you? Heck, you're listening to us, which means you probably watch a game, so we'll be recapping it right here on the Jets All the Way podcast. I, of course, am Jeff Maglicetti, alongside, as always, ESNY editor and founder, Robbie Sabo. Rob, happy football.
Would it still be called the Snoopy Bowl if it's week one of the preseason? Maybe it's the Linus Bowl. Linus was one of the characters, right?
Linus is one of the characters, and let me be honest with you. Let's face it, Linus is probably the one personally, in my opinion, likable character of the Peanuts cast. I was never a big fan of the Peanuts. You know, they picked on Charlie Brown so often, man. I didn't need that. I know it's like, oh, it's realistic. That's what kids really do, but come on, I don't watch that's why I watch cartoons, for realism. So no, thank you. If I want to see that, I'll just go to some playground. So was never a big Peanuts fan. So
we'll call it the Peppermint Patty Bowl because it's week one, and Chandler Catanzaro gets, it seemed his missed opportunities. It's like Peppermint Patty lifting the ball. That's Peppermint Patty? No, I'm getting it all mixed up now. Lucy.
Peppermint Patty is
yes,
one
called the Lucy.
She calls Charlie Brown Chuck and has Marcy follow out calling her sir and whatnot. And Chandler Catanzaro did not live up to those leader expectations, unfortunately.
Yeah, we'll go Lucy. But yeah, it was it's interesting having it in week one. What were your thoughts about the first drive with Darnold and Gase?
Is it too early to get our credentials for the Super Bowl? Is what I'm saying? Is it?
Probably.
No, of course, there's the preseason overreaction. We're seeing that on both sides, of course, but the Jets and the Giants with Daniel Jones. I assume Daniel Jones only played a single drive because he was on his way to Canton for his enshrinement ceremony. So that's why we didn't see much of him. But I got to say, this is a great sign to see from the New York Jets right now. Darnold seems to be picking up where he left off in terms of last season. Remember, there was that three games over a 4-week stretch. We don't really count the Week 17 game against New England. It was the end of the Todd Bowles era and everything. But those 3 games, it seems Darnold is picking up where he left off there. He was finding his receivers well. And I got to say, the one I really want to give the starter I really want to give the game ball to on offense is Jamison Crowder, who did a nice job. He was not only catching the ball, but he had that nice run after the catch. He caught both of his targets, including the 3-yard touchdown, which he beat the defender for, got the ball over the line. So I really want to give some props to Jamison Crowder, who I really think can thrive in this offense in a slot option right now. And I think he did a great job of that on Thursday. I'm really looking forward to see the progress he makes throughout the rest of the summer. And, I do got to say the Jets are in a bit of a tough situation right now. Losing one of their top linemen to injury, you do not want to see that. I mean, the whole point of preseason games is to get out of it unscathed, and Brian Winters did not get out unscathed. He left with a shoulder injury. He's one of their best run blockers and was going to come up huge in the Le'Veon Bell situation. And I think this just proves that I think the timing could not have been better for the Jets to make some moves at this point. So, the entire point of the preseason is to get through it unscathed. And of course, this calls into question why we're having these preseason games, if that's the primary objective. But that's another topic for another day. So I was pleased to see that Darnold seemed to pick up where he left off. I was pleased to see Jamison Crowder's progress. I was also pleased to see the way they utilized Ty Montgomery in the early going, as both a rushing and receiving option. So, like you said before we came on, he is a first teamer basically alongside Le'Veon Bell in this offense. So I thought that was a well-executed first drive. Let's see if they could keep it up. But in the very, 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 very early going, good to see Darnold has picked up where he left off. Good to see Jamison Crowder has found a role in this offense. So I'm looking forward to see what happens once they get more extended reps.
Yeah, Crowder is such a smart slot man, great route runner. If his only bugaboo has been health, he's got to stay healthy. Him and Enunwa together. And if you look at Gase and his utilization of the slot in Miami, in Denver, it's pronounced.
Yeah.
So, Crowder could come away as the number 2 targeted man in this offense when it's all said and done. As far as Montgomery is concerned, yeah, he's a first teamer. You can't look at him as the second team back. He is Gase runs a lot of dual halfback sets, out of the gun, out of the pistol, where you got your 2 wideouts, you got Herndon, you got Bell, and you got Montgomery, and he'll do a lot of that stuff. And on top of it, he's essentially the 4th receiver in the offense right now.
And you know what? The thing about Montgomery is, we criticize him a lot for the way last season ended, and things very much soured quickly in Green Bay. There was that big faux pas against the LA Rams, taking down the end zone and the fumble on the kickoff that could have led to the tie. But we forget how much of a weapon he was in Green Bay down there as both a rushing and receiving threat. So I think this is going to be one of the more underrated signings of the NFL offseason. So I just want to say good job on him. I'm eager to see more of Gase using him, because Gase, like we talked about, he did utilize his set in Miami. We saw, Jay Ajayi and Kenyon Drake working together back there. So I'm interested to see. Kalen Ballage was another one he worked into the unit late last season. So I'm interested to see how this keeps up, because Montgomery, he's one of the better athletes Gase has had in his system, probably even dating back to his Denver days. The athleticism that Montgomery possesses makes him even that much more dangerous. So I'm looking forward to see him land a role in this offense.
Yeah, and when they first acquired Montgomery, I downplayed it. I was dead wrong. I actually thought it would be McGuire when it was all said and done as the second team back. And he could still essentially be the second team back, but I was dead wrong because of Gase's offense. He asks so much in terms of jet sweeps, in terms of orbit motions, out of the pistol, the zone rushing scheme, 3-step drops that Montgomery fits. He completes it so well from a personnel standpoint.
I'm very interested to see how many running backs the Jets keep on this roster right now. Right now, I think Trenton Cannon is the odd man out at this point. Obviously the Jets need to work on their offensive line depth, and we'll get into that in a little bit in a minute or two. But right now, Cannon isn't finding that separation, in my opinion. I think that's going to cost him late. Now, I think Elijah McGuire, he does look a little bit heavier coming into the season, but I think what we saw on Thursday, he's established himself as a bit of a receiving threat as well. Maybe the Montgomery addition lit a fire under him. In fact, McGuire, led the team with 6 receptions on Thursday night and scored the Jets' lone touchdown not lone touchdown, but the other touchdown in the first half after Darnold left the game, catching a short pass from Trevor Siemian. And by the way, I think just to touch on the backup quarterback competition briefly, I think Siemian has nothing to worry about, don't you think?
Yeah.
And
I also think 99% chance they just keep 2 quarterbacks.
Agreed.
Meaning they'll be able to keep maybe 5 backs or 7 or 8 receivers. I think 7 is the minimum at wideout, maybe 8, or running back, receiver, or tight end. He'll choose to go heavy at one of those positions while sacrificing a quarterback. It was an unpopular opinion, but at camp, I actually thought McGuire was the odd man out because he has some strange times in the receiving game. And while Cannon does too, Cannon offers a lot more on special teams. So I thought McGuire might have been the odd man out. If they're only keeping 4, I'd still pick McGuire. But after Thursday, it's up in the air. I think it's a dead heat right now.
Well, it's funny you should mention special teams because I thought someone else established himself in a special teams role. And look, folks, you tune into the Jets All the Way podcast. You're going to hear some names in the preseason you don't know of because I don't know about you, Rob. I certainly don't want to speak for you in this regard, but I'm personally in desperate need of a social life. So the second halves of NFL preseason games are what I describe as a guilty pleasure for myself. Like watching these guys, I like to compare it to watching the Beatles in the Cavern Club all those years ago back in the 60s. Because if you see these guys before they get popular, you have bragging rights forever almost. You could almost say, like, oh, I saw him before he got big. So I'm in desperate need of a social life. So I noticed these guys out there. But a guy that really stood out to me on Thursday night in both the receiving and the special teams game was Greg Dortch, an undrafted free agent out of Wake Forest. He's been one of the more attractive UDFAs of camp, and he really made a name for himself, I thought, on Thursday night. He handled returning duties mostly in the second half, and of course, this is a big need for the Jets, especially after the departure of Pro Bowler Andre Roberts. He had 42 yards on 3 punt returns during the game, and the longest being a 32-yard return. So I think that this was a great job by him. And then in the fourth quarter, he scored the Jets' final touchdown. He ended up having 20 yards on 4 receptions. Those mostly coming in when Luke Falk was in the game as the fourth quarterback. And I think that Dortch really made a name for himself on Thursday. He's the type of guy you want to give a game ball to. The type of guy for that preseason games, they might as well be the Super Bowl for him. He's going to play his way onto the roster, and right now he has the early track to do that. I thought he made a name for himself. What do you think?
Yeah, Jeff, remain loud and proud. Be loud and proud about that second half guilty pleasure. But yeah, Dortch, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough cutting that kid. And if you think about it right now, if you run off 7 wideouts, you got Robbie Anderson, Quincy, Jamison Crowder, Bellamy. And Bellamy is really strictly a special teamer. So there's 4 right there. Okay, Burnett is 5. I don't think there's any way Burnett gets away. The final 2 spots, I think, are going to come down to Deontay Thompson, Dortch, and Tim White.
Interesting.
I think Peak is not long for the squad.
No, I don't think so.
But we'll see. Maybe they can keep 8. Like I said earlier, it'll be tough. But yeah, Dortch, Tim White, they're really deep in the return game this year.
I do want to give some props to Josh Bellamy, who had a solid connection with Trevor Siemian during the game. He had 2 receptions, I believe, about 26 yards. I think both of them went for first downs, or one of them came very close to one either way. But I do want to give him some props in that regard. I also want to give a bit of a shout out to Siemian in the sense that, he did not loosen his stranglehold on the Jets' backup quarterback position. Luke Falk came in and did pretty well, 69 yards on 11 attempts and a touchdown. Got sacked twice, but I think I think that Siemian has the inside edge solely because of his not solely, but in large part due to his starting experience. And when you look at Trevor Siemian, I think he is almost the ideal backup you want to have. He has the experience, and he has had just enough. He's had just the right amount of flashes of brilliance over there in Denver to make you confident that should another brief calamity, and brief in terms of, rather than it being a, 5-week absence, it's only a 2 or 3 week absence. If you have a brief calamity with Darnold, you can survive that mess. That's all. That's what the ideal backup quarterback does. He's the type of guy who can tread water and keep you in games. And I think while the starter heals up, and I think Trevor Siemian is that guy.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think he gets a bad rap sometimes.
He really does. I mean, it's not often you see 7th round quarterbacks thrust into a franchise quarterback role like he was in Denver. Now, granted, this says a lot more about the horrendous mishandling John Elway has done in the post-Peyton Manning era over in Denver, and I guess you could say post-Adam Gase era too as well. We're really getting technical, but I'm eager. But he made the most of what he had in most situations over in Denver. I'm not saying he was an all-pro. They're not going to retire his number over a mile high or anything, but he did solid for what he had, and I think he makes an ideal backup option for the Jets at this point. One more guy I wanted to point out on offense before we transition to other parts of the game. I wanted to praise Valentine Holmes a little bit. He did a great job. The rugby player coming over for Jets this year. I don't believe he's eligible to make the roster this year, but he had himself a nice game. 3 receptions on 3 targets, 30 yards, the longest being 14, and he even had a trio of carries, the longest going for 5 yards, 6 on the even total. So I want to give him some props there, and I just want to thank all the rugby fans over from the land down under for crimming my mentions in the fourth quarter. So it really kept me entertained in the late going.
Yeah, there's no way. You don't have a soul if you don't like that kid.
No.
That's the bottom line. You're someone who needs to be cast aside if you have a bad word to say about Valentine Holmes.
No, you're absolutely right. He's a tremendous story, and definitely one of the things you'll keep an eye on this preseason. Now, going to the defense, I mean, you can't go too crazy over it because these are a lot of backup guys, and most of them will be gone by the time we're ready to kick off for week 1. Jamal Adams only played very briefly, but someone who I thought really stood out to me was Frankie Louvu. I thought he did a fantastic job out there. He did very solid. He had a team-high 6 tackles. And I believe at one point, one thing I noticed, which was very out of character, I believe, for a Gregg Williams defense, the Jets didn't really dial up the pressure as much as I would have liked them to on Thursday night. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and you know what? He's not gonna. In preseason, I think he's still in that mindset of rotate as many packages as possible, play as many fronts as humanly possible to see what I have, because I still don't know what I have in terms of personnel.
Interesting. That makes sense. Gregg Williams has just built such reputation, both for the positive and negative of this league. And you know what? I was just a little surprised that he didn't up the pressure a little bit, especially with the Giants playing a rookie quarterback in Daniel Jones. So interesting to see. But I do want to give a shout out to Frankie Louvu, team high 6 tackles. And I think the most notable play he made, that was in the late stages of the second quarter. He was one of the rare guys who got pressure on the quarterback, doing so on Alex Tanney when he was in. He not only got pressure but forced a fumble, which was recovered by Neville Hewitt inside the Jets' red zone. It led to a field goal, so maybe the Jets are in midseason form after all. I kid, of course, but a good job by him. Game high 6 tackles and a forced fumble, and a great job for a guy who maybe his roster spot is in jeopardy, but it does give the coaches, it does give him some more insurance, and gives the coaches something to think about as they look to trim the linebacker spot moving forward.
Yeah, the Louvu, he's in a battle right now with seemingly everybody.
Yeah.
The first thing to take away, this is the first time everyone could see what Gregg is doing outside of camp.
Yes.
The first thing to take away is Henry Anderson. Well, the first thing is the 3-4 versus 4-3 is the most overrated discussion in the history of mankind.
Interesting.
Gregg Williams, he started with the 3-4 the first week of camp. Since then, it's been 4-3. His sub packages are a 4-man front, which is common for either base. But in the sub, in the 4-3, Henry Anderson is his edge solution right now, opposite Jordan Jenkins.
Right.
And Brandon Copeland is playing on the second level with Mosley and Avery Williamson. When he wants to go with 2 true edges, it's Basham, Copeland, Louvu, and Kufasi who are battling it out right now.
I think the battle that I'm keeping an eye on the most personally is the who's going to line up next to Adams in safety week 1. And right now, with Marcus May still sidelined, he was talking about some nerve issues in his latest statements. I believe Gase said it actually. Excuse me, but I think the battle to watch moving forward is going to be between Rontez Miles and Doug Middleton. Both of them work back there on Thursday. They kind of had a rough go at it, especially late in the game. The Giants kind of open it up a little bit, especially when Kyle Lauletta entered the game. But it's definitely going to be an interesting battle, I think, to see those two tested veterans go at it. Miles, in particular, has really made a name for himself on special teams. So I'll be real interested to see if he can establish himself as a common name in the Jets defense. What do you think?
Man, you're so right, and it's interesting in Gregg's defense because some defensive coordinators, the way they play, it's a cover 2 Tampa or a cover 4, both
Right.
of the safeties kind of play the same role, the
Yeah.
same 2 deep role. In Gregg's defense, Jamal Adams is basically an in-the-box safety. The strong safety is basically everywhere, and he's at the line, and the free safety is a center fielder extraordinaire, an angel-type safety who plays in another zip code.
Right.
I don't think that fits Rontez Miles so great, but the interesting thing is he has that position on lockdown. Middleton is not getting much by the way of first-team reps.
Yeah.
But a lot of fans argue they want to see Middleton, and they want to see what he can do. He has been plugged in years past, and it'll be interesting. Keep an eye on that moving forward because it is up in the air for sure.
And it stinks for Middleton because he actually got some opportunities last year when May was dealing with a broken thumb, but then he himself suffered an injury, so that he was placed on IR back in October. So it was unfortunate to see, and it's definitely something. His reps are going to be something that all Jets fans should keep an eye on as we move forward in this preseason, which continues next week against the Atlanta Falcons down over in Atlanta. That's going to be on the 15th. That's going to be Thursday night at 7:30 p.m. Now, to go back to the offense real quick, I think it's interesting, the interesting signings of Khalil and bringing in Alex Lewis. That just made the Jets offensive line must-see viewing this summer and the Winters injury adds to it too, because suddenly some guys who probably felt, oh, we'll make the team, their roster spots are in jeopardy right now, don't you think?
Yeah. Joe Douglas does not mess around.
No, he's done fantastic. I mean, say what you will about the McCagnon era, Douglas has been so active already. It's fantastic to see.
Folks, he's the real deal.
Yeah.
He understands how to build a football team, and I don't care if it's arena football. It always starts within the trenches. Quarterback in the trenches. He said it on day one. It's what got me so excited. McCagnon didn't say it once in 5 years, and the Khalil signing took my predictions from like a 7-8 win team to now a 9-10 win team. It is that important. The center does so much for the entire offense, and with Khalil in the middle and Osemele looking like a beast, by the way. Michael Mania writing on the takeaways yesterday, Osemele the beast was one of the main takeaways.
Yeah.
It has me giddy.
No, it's eager to see. Now, again, I don't want to raise anyone's expectations here. I do think that making the playoffs is going to be an uphill battle for this team, especially with so many quote unquote established contenders in the AFC right now. But there's no doubt that they've improved with these moves right now, and suddenly it's going to be interesting to see a lot of guys battle for spots on this roster right now. I mean, some guys I felt like they took a lot of penalties on the offensive line moving forward in Thursday's game, and I definitely think that didn't play well into some guys' favor. I think that Jonathan Harrison's going to be having to fight for his life right now over at the center spot, because that's a spot Khalil will potentially take. And I definitely think if Winters is out for a considerable amount of time, this is going to be a big opportunity for Alex Lewis, who was recently brought in for a 7th rounder from Baltimore. He's mostly played the left side most of his career, but that spot, of course, is taken up by the beast Osemele right now. So I'll be interested to see if the Jets try to move him to the right, especially if Winters is out for a considerable amount of time.
Yeah, let's break it down. You got Beachum, Osemele, Khalil, Winters, Shell.
Yes.
Now, they'll probably keep 9. 9 is usually the nicest number on the O-line. Sometimes it's 8, sometimes it's 10. Let's say it's 9. Adoga is the backup tackle.
Yes.
Cavalli right now, I don't know what's going on. He's still out. So his status is up in the air. You got Adoga, you got Lewis, you got Harrison, you got Compton. Those are probably the guys, but, Toth is still in there. I'm probably missing a few. But the depth is present, like you said, and there are jobs up for grabs, especially if Winters is out. Do we know how serious his injury is?
He went in for tests on Friday, I believe.
Okay, so we're still waiting. Maybe they'll definitely update us tomorrow at camp. But yeah, they're deep, and you got to feel okay with Lewis or Compton even at right guard.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's it. Again, it all depends on what Winters does. But going back to your point about what you said, the center spot, I thought that was best on display last season in that disastrous second Miami game down in South Beach, where Spencer Long was just having so much trouble with Darnold, and you know what? He botched like about 6 or 7 snaps, and it eventually led to increased pressure, and that is how Darnold got hurt, and that's how he missed those 3 games. So it all starts and ends at the center spot. And one more thing that I want to get into, being a former long snapper, I just have to get into this. I have to say something. The special teams. Now, you talked about that Joe Douglas is a go-getter. He likes to get things done, and the kicking spot is no exception. Let's talk. We talk about a report from Manish Mehta of the New York Daily News. He has reported today that the Jets have brought in a group of kickers to potentially replace Chandler Catanzaro, who missed his first 2 extra points on Thursday night. And among that group, brace yourself, Rob, Blair Walsh.
Ooh, listen. At one point, Blair Walsh was a stud.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right about that. It was that one kick, which I could go on for hours on how I don't fully blame Blair Walsh for losing that game. Granted, it's probably the special teamer in me, but I'll give you the abridged version of the Blair Walsh thing. The Vikings lost that game 10-9 to Seattle. Let's face it. Blair Walsh scored all their points in that game, number one. You score 1 touchdown, it's a completely different story. The real GOAT of that game is Adrian Peterson, who fumbled deep in Minnesota territory and led to Seattle's winning score, their only touchdown of the game. So Blair Walsh, if he could fix the yips from that historic chip shot miss, I think it could be a good idea. But that's a big if, though. The others, according to Manish, Chris Blewett is going to be in the tryouts. So. If there was ever a more inappropriate name for a kicker, it would probably be Chris Blewett. But he had a decent career over at Pitt. In fact, he hit that long field goal a couple years back that defeated Clemson, I believe.
Consider this: the first name that pops in my mind when I think of Blair Walsh and a potential redemption story is Nick Folk. Nick Folk was also a stud.
Yes,
I think both of them made the Pro Bowl their first year.
Yes.
Their rookie year, they kind of fell off. Folk found his way with the Jets. I wouldn't. Blair Walsh is intriguing to me immediately, right off the bat.
It's interesting because once Catanzaro missed those extra points, I immediately took a look at the free agents available, and I didn't see Blair Walsh on that list if I recall correctly. I was mainly looking on Spot Rack, and Cody Parkey was another one. The Chicago kicker who with the double doinker against Philadelphia. I just said, hey, he's a veteran option. Don't worry about it. I also think the Jets are going to keep an eye on the training camp legs throughout the rest of the league. See who gets released and take a go at them. Do their due diligence, of course, but. Another one who was available, it was Sebastian Janikowski, 41 years old. Hey, they convinced Ryan Khalil out of retirement. Why not Seabass?
Yeah, I mean, if they ever get into a bar fight, Janikowski, just bring him along, and you're good to go.
I mean, hey, with the names that the Jets are getting, they would probably be well suited for that. Well suited in that category. Maybe that should be a Pro Bowl event. How about that? We replace the dodgeball match with the bar fight competition. That'd be great to see. Ross Martin is another one. He's at Duke. He was actually recently campaigning for the Jets to pick him up. So we'll take a look at that. So we'll see what happens. See what happens from these tryouts today. Now to wrap it up, let's talk about the game against Atlanta this week. Rob, what are you looking to see from this Falcons game?
Well. For anyone looking to see Le'Veon play, it's not going to happen. Le'Veon will not play this preseason. Outside chance he plays 1 series in week 3, but I don't think so.
No, it's a little surprising.
Darnold, it is surprising based on missing an entire season.
Exactly.
But I think Gase has been molded by the veterans he's come across. Peyton Manning, under John O. I think he's been molded in that way. So if the back is not screaming, "Hey, I want to play," I think that's the default status. In terms of Darnold, again, expect one series. I really think expect one series unless it's a terrible series, and you'll give him a second shot. But
I think it's also a case of the Sean McVay effect that's affected basically the entire league. And McVay, of course, made a name for himself in a way, in many ways, as a matter of fact, by sitting all of his starters for the preseason games. And of course, the Rams offense contains so much offensive firepower, Jared Goff, Todd Gurley, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it is the Sean McVay effect that's taking over the league a little bit in keeping Le'Veon out for these few preseason games.
Yeah, the traditionalist of me hates it because you see how sloppy the tackling is in week 1 and week 2. It's so sloppy in September. It's so bad. Sometimes the offensive line plays atrocious.
Sometimes we're just so glad to have football back we don't even notice in a way.
Exactly. But, this is a new age NFL. There are no doubles. Very rarely is it 100% live in practice. So even if they do play in the preseason, how much of a difference is it going to make? You don't know.
That's why it's such a thrill to watch these preseason games sometimes, because these are their rare opportunities to actually get some hitting done out there. So because it's not extinct in a way, but the contact practices in training camp, they're at the very least an endangered species. So
yeah, do you remember back in the day when there was 6 preseason games?
Yeah. That's
6, folks. And it was a legitimate season prior to the season. They ran doubles. Bear Bryant, if he knew what was going on right now in football, in the land of football, he would lose his mind.
But I don't think he'd be able to handle it.
No, he wouldn't. But some of the stuff he did was criminal.
Yes,
if you know the Junction Boys.
Oh, like we're not fully condoning what he did at all. Just as a disclaimer, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's man. You think you had it rough if you played high school ball in the '90s. Forget about it.
Hey, I 4 years of Don Bosco prep football here, so you don't have to lecture me about it.
Yeah, it's different levels. Bear Bryant was a 10, 20 years ago was a 6 or 5. Now it's a 2 or 1.
Yeah.
It's just a different way. It's just a new world.
Yeah, based on what we know now, it's a changing world, basically.
Yeah. So, I mean, what can you do? What can you expect? What do you look for against Atlanta? You look for livelihoods on the line. You look for jobs. Who's going to win the jobs? You look at the edge position. Look at the base Gregg Williams rolls out. I don't think he'll get exotic, but look at who he's leaning towards in terms of personnel. Is it Rontez Miles for sure? Is he comfortable with Henry Anderson on the edge? If he's not, the 3 interior beasts can't get on the field at the same time in the sub, in the nickel, and the dime. And look at the O-line. Look at Khalil's integration into the offense.
Yes. I definitely think that there are plenty of jobs up for grabs on the O-line now, with the additions of Khalil and Lewis, two experienced NFL veterans. I'm also going to keep an eye once again on the special teams battle in terms of returner. Can Greg Dortch get another wave of momentum going for himself? That'll be interesting to see. I am looking forward to seeing that defense. Maybe, who knows, maybe Williams will up the pressure a little bit this time. And, just, again, have a clean game, get out of there injury-free, and, just go out there, hit somebody, see what you do, and be clean about it.
And as a fan, do the breakdown in your head. So they're going to keep 3 special teamers, as always. Hennessy, the kicker, and the punter.
Yes.
Gase will probably go with 26 offensive players, 24 defensive. Obviously, not probably, but think of that number. 26 on offense. 2 quarterbacks, 4 running backs. That's 6. 7 receivers. That's 13. 4 tight ends. That's 17. 9 linemen. That's 25.
Right.
Where's the extra guy coming from? Does he just keep 25? Kind of do that and see who's going to make the team, who's eligible for the practice squad. I think that's the best way to attack the preseason as a fan.
I think personally that the second preseason game has taken on a much more enormous importance because they no longer have the cut down to 75. They just go right to 53. So I think this second preseason game takes on a bigger importance in the sense that this is going to be the last opportunity you kind of have in a way. Of course, you have that fourth game, but by that point, a lot of the roster spots are already decided because the third game's a dress rehearsal, and the fourth game they basically send out what's basically the practice squad, I believe, out there. And is sometimes by the time you get to the fourth game, the coach's mind is already made up. So this second game is going to be one where jobs are won and lost, I feel. Do you agree?
Yeah, and I don't know if I like that rule, the new cut down rule. What is this, the second or third year with it?
Yeah, I think it's the 17, 18. This is the third year with it, I believe.
Okay, and by the way, HBO, Hard Knocks probably hates that rule. It takes away so much drama from the show. I mean, speaking of the show, Antonio Brown.
Say again?
Antonio Brown.
Oh, my goodness.
What is going on with this guy?
So, from a local standpoint, to fit our benefits, how much of a bullet did the Jets dodge in that regard?
I was completely against it. I was also against Le'Veon. You can't deny his talent, obviously. I'm fair about it. But I was even more against Antonio Brown. If he was 26, okay, let's go. But football being such a culture game, such a locker room game, such a momentum game, you can't handle that stuff. I mean, that's just ridiculous.
I feel that Antonio Brown is the result of Odell Beckham Jr. critics' wildest dream. Now, granted, I'm not saying Odell isn't entirely controversy-free either. He says things that I personally probably wouldn't necessarily say in public either. But Antonio Brown feels like Odell times 50 with his antics. So I feel that, if Odell was doing this, people would be going much crazier over it. I've seen some people writing this up, it's just A-B, B, and A-B. I think that is not the case. And I actually wrote back in, I believe it was January, I wrote how the Jets should pass on this Antonio Brown situation because Antonio Brown was a guy who was going into this offseason looking for redemption, especially after the way things soured in the end in Pittsburgh. So, and he has yet to find it, it feels like, over in Oakland. I think anyone involved with the organization will agree with you on that. The Jets are a team looking for redemption as well. They haven't made the playoffs in 8 years. They're looking to, start anew with this new Gase era by bringing in the rookie quarterback last season, by bringing in some free agent names. So facilitating a redemption story on such a high-profile case was the last distraction they needed right now. And right now it seems like that's being proven correct.
Yeah, and in a strange way, I understand his claim here with the helmet. He either wears the old school Riddell helmet, or the shut air. I forget which one. And I understand his claim. Once you find that helmet, you don't want to change. You don't. But you can't take it this far. The quotes he said, football doesn't, I don't need football. Football needs me. I forget if it was the Steelers or the Raiders. They'll have to play. They'll have to work with me on my terms. It's just outrageous. You can't have that guy on your team. You just can't. It doesn't work.
Football has survived without Antonio Brown for nearly 100 seasons, and they'll survive again without him as well. And I feel these are just discussions you handle internally, and it's one of the many reasons the Jets dodge a major bullet here. So that's going to do it for us here on the Jets All the Way podcast. Follow both of us on Twitter and like ESNY Jets on Facebook. And we'll be back next week to recap the Atlanta game. For Robbie Sabo, I'm Jeff Magliuchetti. Thanks for listening, folks.